is a big debate actually. Should we insist on the reading and writing skills of the analog era? Do we insist that they be perfected in the digital era, or should we develop a new form of digital literacy that is much more appropriate? Are we developing a new language, a new way of communication that does not follow the old rules? I'm not sure. I personally am a great believer in elegant language and grammar and proper spelling, and I find and I think it still has a role in in intellectual life, properly thinking and analyzing and putting your thoughts together in a coherent way instead of just putting random, unorganized thoughts on paper. I still think we need to develop the intellectual skills that writing requires. Writing is not just saying exactly what's on your mind. It means thinking about language, thinking about structure, thinking about how to develop thoughts, thinking about, writing is developing a thought. It's not randomly putting together random streams of thought that you happen to have at the right time. And I think this is one disadvantage of blogging, where people can basically blog without thinking and just put unedited thoughts together. But I'm hoping eventually that, because there will be so much content on the internet, that eventually people will veer towards content that is much more beautifully presented, that's more, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's a new generation, and maybe we have to rethink the meaning of writing and reading literacy for this new generation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now we have UP Los Baños. Our moderator is Professor Aldo Lim. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Ms. Coronel. Thank you for your wonderful talk. Sitting beside me is Angela Mina. She's a BS Development Communication student, and she'll address you her question.
Good afternoon, ma'am. You were emphasizing on the use of the internet for information dissemination. Would you say that nowadays we could consider the web as a more important and more persuasive form than the offline materials that we have, like newspapers?
Okay, I will repeat the question because it came in a bit choppy. You are emphasizing the use of the internet for information dissemination. Would you say that nowadays we could consider the web as a more important and more persuasive form than offline materials such as newspapers?
I believe that newspapers inhabit a media ecology. The internet is part of that ecology. There's room there for newspapers, for radio, for television, and for the web. And all of them together create an information sphere, and that this does not make newspapers useless, because reading newspapers on paper is still a different experience, because you can actually focus on one without looking at links and being distracted. It's still a much deeper experience than reading online. So I think we have an audience now that will go for different reading experiences, and each medium has particular strengths. And the internet has many strengths, but it has many weaknesses as well. So I think there is room for newspapers, but increasingly young people will be going to the web. That will be the main platform for news for young people.
Okay, thank you very much.
Maybe older people will stick to newspapers.
Thank you. We are also getting the questions via Skype for the information of those who are wondering how we're able to get the questions here. Our next campus we're coming back to Diliman. Okay, there was a gentleman who wanted to ask a question. Yes, please.
My name is Chris Lacaba. It's a follow-up to that last statement. Given that there's space for both newspapers, television, and the internet to coexist, how will they now differentiate how they play against each other? How will they complement each other? What role will each medium play?
Okay, yes. I think you will have, one is generational. There will be generational preferences for certain types of news platforms. I think young people will prefer the web and mobile phones will prefer to get their news from. The other one is class and language. In the Philippines, for example, newspapers are all in English. So you will have your English-speaking urban middle class and your political class reading newspapers. And I think and we see that in other countries as well, where newspapers will increasingly no longer be mass circulation, but will increasingly be the news organs for your middle class and your political elites. The internet and television and radio will continue to have a mass audience. In the Philippines, I think the accustomed standard is newspapers are in English, radio and television are in Tagalog. So you actually you have different classes of people using different types of media platforms. I'm not sure this is good because I'm not sure you can continue having a national conversation if different classes of people rely on different types of news platforms for the news and information, but that is what is going to happen. It's going to happen on the web as well, where you have increased niching. So people just interested in fencing or surfing, just reading fencing or surfing sites, it will be difficult to aggregate those voices. But at the same time, that will create the need for certain news organizations to act as aggregators, to tell you what is going on elsewhere in the web because you don't have the time to read everything else. So there will be an additional function for journalists, no longer just reporting on the news, but also aggregating and putting together information because people simply do not have time. I said a while ago that the internet is a link economy. It is also an attention economy because there's so many websites and so little time. No one can possibly look at all that content. So an emerging form of journalism now is summarizing, aggregating, and picking out what is relevant to users. So there will be different uses. I think the internet will be very good for the aggregation function because of the links capacity. Because you can link to news stories and people, if they are interested, can go there. You do not have that link capacity for newspapers. Newspapers will increasingly be the home of more in-depth, longer, and more sophisticated content, I think. Or should be, because your audience is for breaking news and for more lighter content will go to the web and to television.
Okay, our next question is from UP Iloilo. Our moderator is Dr. Belia Grace Barrera. Go ahead, Iloilo.
Good afternoon. The question is from Mr. Hannibal Kamwa, faculty member of the Division of Social Sciences, College of Arts and Sciences. You referred to the vital role media played in Philippine politics, especially in ousting tyrannical and corrupt leaders. But how do we address the problem of media being used as a propaganda tool for corrupt politicians who wish to remain in power, now that media has evolved into something which has a limitless audience reach, an audience that has no access to the web?
Okay, that's a very good question. I think in a way, the internet can potentially act as a check on the control of information by people who pay off journalists or own newspapers or TV stations, because anyone can now publish on the web. You don't have to be a Lopez or a Prieto to put out, to have your voice out there. So that acts as a check against entrenched elites who happen to own or have a monopoly of the ownership of mainstream media. But I agree that content is currently not now filtering to ordinary people. But that is why I am hoping that mobile phones, which most Filipinos generally have access to, can be a new way of accessing information. There's now developing ways to get radio, for example, on your mobile phone, and you don't need to own a radio station to do that. Like you can get radio, beam it digitally through the internet, and use your mobile phone to get radio broadcast, and that provides room for more voices, more independent voices, and hopefully voices that are not paid to not their master's voice, but really voices that reflect, believe in fostering civic responsibility and a civic and public life. Technology allows us the means to do these things, but unless it will not do it automatically. We need also to create a community of journalists, a community of news content producers, and an audience for these things. So it will not come about automatically just because we have the technology. What we need is to train people to be able to use that technology and to produce that content to reach the audience we want to reach. Yeah.
Okay. We're coming back here into Diliman again, and we have time for 2 questions. Who wants to take those 2 questions? Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Bianca Consundi. Considering that the practice of journalism isn't a strictly professionalized one, even on organized level here or anywhere, in the sense that we don't have licenses, etc., how do you think can citizen journalism be improved to reach a certain standard of responsible communication? Or is it even possible to be able to control the content or at least standardize it somehow?
You're right. I mean, the problem with citizen journalism is you get all sorts of content, and a lot of it is really not to the standards of professional journalism. One way to do it is, you train citizen journalists as well, and this is what they're doing in Korea, where the pioneering citizen website Oh My News has actually set up a school for citizen journalists. I think the history of any medium, for example, when newspapers first came out, they were the work of amateurs. But increasingly, as the audience matures, then you'll have increasingly more and more professional content, and your audience tends to go to where there is more professional content. Will that happen with citizen journalism? I'm guessing that it is, because we're in the US, for example, where there have been many more experiments on citizen journalism for a far longer period of time, you actually have citizen journalist sites now that have a mix of both professional and non-professional journalists working together, and the quality is competitive to the quality of mainstream media. So over time, I'm hoping that the quality of citizen-produced content and citizen-produced sites will improve. But again, that requires the cooperation of an entire community. You also need an audience that appreciates quality. So it's this synergy that we need to bring that about.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps in the College of Mass Comm, it's time to propose a new GE course, citizen journalism. All right, we have time for just one more question. Yes, please.
I'm Belia Lucas. I'm with the UP Center for Integrative and Development Studies. Professor Sheila mentioned earlier that media in the Philippines is more focused on toppling regimes than in reforming new ones. But in the case of the current regime, we have not toppled nor reformed it. Okay, no, I'm not yet done. Is this an indication of the strength of this government or on the waning power of media? Thank you.
Maybe it's both. Maybe it's both. I have not lived in this country for the last 2 years, so I don't really follow politics day to day. But yes, this regime is really very strong, and I think also, but those are not the only 2 players. There's the larger society. There's the public as well, and the public is, I think, in this, you're talking about media and political regimes. The public is actually the one that shifts the balance in the end. Power belongs to the people, not to the government or the media. Yeah.
Well, thank you, and once again, we'd like to thank our centennial lecturer, Professor Sheila Coronel.
Thank you.